The Red Sea Crossing. Egypt is steeped with a grand history of ancient science, technology, and beautiful structures. But is there evidence of the children of Israel ever living there? Many years ago, this large stone was discovered in the first cataract of the Nile on Elephantine Island. The inscription states, "For 7 years, there had been no satisfactory inundation of the Nile. As the result of this, grain of every kind was very scarce. In this terrible trouble, King Chesser remembered the god Imhotep, who had once delivered Egypt from a similar calamity." Imhotep can be found in Egyptian history in many places, and it appears he was a sage who was elevated to a god over a period of centuries after his death. Perhaps most confident was Imhotep, the architect who probably conceived of building Zozer's tomb completely from stone. Known as a sculptor, a priest, a healer, Imhotep is considered the preeminent genius of the Old Kingdom. Imhotep had even saved his country from famine. Could Imhotep and Joseph have been one and the same person? We head to Saqqara, Egypt, a short distance south of Cairo. This is where the first pyramid was built in ancient Egypt. It is called the Step Pyramid due to the distinct levels in its shape. We can see where a smooth veneer layer of limestone had once been applied over the brick, creating a smooth surface, but most of it has since been removed. Here is where we find the statue of Pharaoh Zoser, under whom Imhotep served. It was on the base of this statue of Zoser that Imhotep was mentioned as a man, not as a god. He was first after the king, with his cartouche shown here. At the complex of buildings, the main hall is of importance to us. It was here and in other locations in Egypt that Joseph saved his country from famine. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "Indeed, 7 years of great plenty will come throughout all the land of Egypt, but after them, 7 years of famine will deplete the land." In Joseph's day, as one entered the building, they would make their way down this hallway to purchase grain. There would be many cashiers available for customers of various languages to trade for the much-needed food. The famine was all over the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. As we exit the hallway through the area in the rear, we see over on one side a series of deep structures where grain was stored underground during the 7 years of plenty. Then over the next 7 years, it was sold to the Egyptians and visitors from other countries. A system of vertical underground silos created a cooler environment for the grain to be stored. This was the design of the genius, Joseph. When grain was removed from storage, the oldest grain was carried up by way of this long descending stairway. The grain silos were interconnected via tunnels, which allowed the grain to flow down to a central exit point located at the bottom of this stairway. A record of this event of removing the grain can be seen on hieroglyphics such as this at Thebes, showing the sacks of grain being carried up the stairs from the granaries. Another example of this can be seen at the tomb of Iti. As a way to honor the Lord of Heaven, Joseph built this first pyramid in Egypt at Saqqara to show his thankfulness to the Lord for honoring him and saving the Egyptian people from famine. In that day, there will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt. Centuries later, many other great pyramids were built in Egypt, following the lead of Joseph or Imhotep. The children of Israel were living in the best of the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. This area is the fertile Nile Delta in northern Egypt. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen. This also describes the fertile Nile Delta. The Nile Delta is shown here at the northern termination of the Nile, full of lush vegetation, in contrast to the surrounding desert. On the night of Passover, the firstborn in each Egyptian home died in the final plague. Then the children of Israel left Egypt that same day. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. On that very same day, it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. On the day of Passover, the children of Israel crossed the canals of the Nile and became an organized unit at Succoth. They had left the country of Egypt proper, but they were still in territory controlled by the Egyptians. So God led the people around by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea. The wilderness of the Red Sea is what we call today the Sinai Peninsula, which is surrounded on two sides by the Red Sea. It was through the northern region of the peninsula that they traveled day and night, making their rapid escape from the hands of Pharaoh. During the day they were shaded by the pillar of cloud that would have also provided moisture for them. At night, the pillar of fire would have given them light for their journey. At Etham, they turned south and headed through the mountains in the wilderness of the Red Sea, traveling through a narrow canyon, then stopping at the Red Sea. This expanse of water is called the Gulf of Aqaba today, but in Moses' day it was called the Red Sea. King Solomon also built a fleet of ships at Ezion-Geber, which is near Elath, on the shore of the Red Sea, in the land of Edom. Ancient Elath is modern-day Eilat, Israel. Our modern Gulf of Aqaba is the ancient Red Sea, or Yam Suf. This is the beach where the children of Israel were trapped with nowhere to escape. The Egyptian army was fast approaching, and it appeared death was imminent. The children of Israel cried out, "Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us to bring us out of Egypt?" The children of Israel were already out of Egypt when they were preparing to cross the Red Sea. This would exclude any crossing of the Bitter Lakes or the Gulf of Suez. It was at this site that God was preparing to demonstrate to prove His loving care for them. This is the large beach on the Gulf of Aqaba, called Nuweiba, Egypt. This is where it appeared that the forces of darkness were about to be triumphant, but God was in control. Across the Gulf is the land of Midian and the holy mountain of God. They were to camp between Migdol and the sea, Migdol meaning a fortified city or tower. At the north end of the beach are the remains of an ancient fort, still partially standing today. It was once a three-story structure, capable of housing hundreds of Egyptian soldiers who could have prevented any northern escape from the beach. The location is precisely at the narrowest point of land, between the mountains and the sea, in order to control the movement of travelers through the area. The fortress today is receiving a fresh coat of stucco, which is unfortunately covering up the original stone blocks. At the front of the fortress, we were able to see the stonework that formed the entrance into the structure. In the middle of the courtyard, we can see an ancient well that would have supplied the fresh water for the many Egyptian soldiers that were housed here. Outside, we can see how tall the structure had been in its former days, a full 3 stories in height. Another description of the location for the Red Sea crossing was Camp before Pi-Hahiroth, which means mouth of a hole or canyon. As the children of Israel entered the beach, they had made their way through a system of canyons or wadis and encountered this beach at the Red Sea. The Bible tells us, "They are entangled in the land, the wilderness hath shut them in." They had finally made it through the canyons that snaked their way through the mountains, but now they were trapped on the beach. And the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. It was here that the pillar of cloud blocked the Egyptians from advancing toward the children of Israel. For there was on each side a ridge of mountains that terminated at the sea, which were impassable by reason of their roughness and obstructed their flight. There must have been excitement as they reached the beach at the sea, but that soon turned to gloom as they discovered their plight. They were trapped on the beach, awaiting their death at the hands of Pharaoh.